everybody. Welcome to episode number 3 of the Clarity Project podcast. I'm your host, Carl Umali. So, for today's episode, I'm still going to read some of the notes that I have in my notebook, and I'm going to reflect on them and try to expand more on those ideas. So, this one is from September 23, 2022, and this is really interesting because my birthday is on September 24th. I remember that this year, 2023, at the same date, September 23, I held a talk for a state university. It's so crazy that when I wrote this in 2022, I would have never thought that in the next year, which is this year, I would be able to have a chance to be able to be a guest speaker or inspirational speaker. I don't know really what they called it, but I really didn't know that I would have that kind of an opportunity to be able to speak to a lot of young professionals. So, yeah, that's really crazy to think about. So, let's read this note. It is called The Unexpected Price of Success. Before there are really bold risks, he was making art. He was afraid that people were going to steal his ideas. Now, the thing he is doing became more like managing a brand. He became more methodical. So, what this person is telling us is that in the start of his creative journey, just like to probably where I am right now, he started off as someone who was making bold risks. He was a risk taker. He was just doing it because he likes to be able to create art. The only thing that he was afraid of is that people might steal his ideas. This is a similar sentiment to what I feel sometimes because sometimes I put off an episode or a topic of an episode just because I feel like that idea is so good, but I don't feel like I should give it out to the world or I should share it to the world just because it's that good. I had definitely had a share wherein I was afraid of sharing an idea because I feel like it's such a good idea and I'm afraid that people might steal it from me. Now, this is kind of the same thinking or philosophy that he was in. He was just afraid that people might steal his ideas. Fast forward to today, wherein he became a success. He felt like the only thing that he is doing right now is managing a brand. He became more methodical, right? In the thing that I'm doing here with the Project podcast, it might seem like there's structure to it because I'm always reading off something of a note. So there is quite an expected output that you're going to see. It's probably going to be something about whatever it that is inside this notebook. But that's about it. Listen, this is not pre-planned. This is not canned at any way at all. What I'm doing here, I feels like art because while there is kind of a guide to where the topic is going to go because I'm reading it off this notebook, I do not pre-plan the each and every episode. I do not have a script. I don't even have an outline on what I want to say. Also, and furthermore, I don't review and I don't read ahead, so I don't know what I'm going to read. I am specifically doing that because I want to be able to reflect on the things that I wrote down before, which probably I forgot now, and see how my philosophy has changed from when I wrote it versus to today. He said that right now he's more of just managing a brand. He is probably just keeping up with the kind of image wherein he became successful with. And that is the unexpected price of success. Because if you become successful at being just this one thing, people expect that you are that thing 24/7 or 100% of the time. People's judgments and expectations is catered towards that kind of identity that you became known with. That is why when we see other celebrities and other figures that venture into other things, it's weird. That is why when we saw Michael Jordan retire and go into baseball, it was weird. People have this bias of just putting you in terms of a category. People have a bias and just thinking of you in terms of one identity. Just look at the kind of identities that I had when I was growing up. Now, you might not know me personally, but depending on when you met me, you would have probably have a different kind of idea on who I am and what I do. If you met me in sixth grade, late sixth grade, you probably would have said that I'm a dancer. If you have met me in fourth grade, you probably have said that I'm someone who is making comic books or someone who is really obsessed into visual arts. If you met me in fifth grade, you probably know me as someone who is the history guy, who's really obsessed with history. If you met me in seventh grade, you probably knew me as someone who plays basketball all the way to eighth grade. In 10th grade, and starting 10th grade, you probably knew me as the vice president of the student council. A few months after that, you probably knew me as someone who competed for the first time and represented the school for the impromptu speaking competition. A few months after that, you would have known me as a poet, someone who competed and became a champion in spoken poetry. A few months after that, in 11th grade, you probably knew me as a vlogger. And a few months after that, you probably knew me as a filmmaker. So there's many more that I didn't mention, but I guess you share a similar kind of a story to me. In each epochs of your life, you are a different person somewhat. You were interested in different things during different times of your life. You prioritize and you value certain things that you probably don't value or prioritize right now. Yes, there are still characteristics, there are still things that you like and things that you still enjoy and things that you would say that is still you, inherently you. But you cannot deny the fact that you also change throughout the years. And so the problem is that when people try to cage you in a kind of identity that you are no longer anymore, when people know you for something and they expect that you are still that thing or you are still that person who was interested in this specific thing. People forget that people evolve and people change more often than you think. Sometimes it is these expectations of other people that traps us into being something that we don't like to be anymore. But sometimes it is our own expectations of ourselves that trap us inside an identity that we don't want to be anymore. So let's read further. You are so disproportionately rewarded from one thing that you almost became trapped because and to that one thing. He realized he liked being bad at stuff. He liked learning and climbing a mountain. I think he should just find a new mountain. Michael Jordan's motivation in his rookie year was different from later on. It's about changing your leverage. So that final paragraph is actually a note of mine based on the note. So like there's a note to the note. So basically this says that probably in the similar sentiment that I was talking about earlier, that he was disproportionately rewarded from just that one thing, that he became trapped because of that one thing. He realized that he wanted to be a beginner again, that he liked being bad at stuff, and he liked learning and climbing a mountain. This shares the similar sentiment to one of my tweets years ago, and it goes along the lines of, we are now in our good old days. We are now in our humble beginnings. We see successful people talk about their humble beginnings, of how they miss it, on how much exciting their climb was. And yet here we are, in our own humble beginnings, in our good old days, not seeing the value behind them. To give commentary on my note, I said that I think he should just find a new mountain. Like Michael Jordan's motivation in his rookie year was different from later on. It's about changing your leverage. Because sometimes we forget that we can change our goals, we can change our dreams, and we can change our goalposts. We can always change the way that we want. Because sometimes we forget that we don't have to be stuck into just pursuing this one thing. We should not be stuck in just pursuing just this one goal. If we feel that it's no longer serving us, it doesn't really represent what we want and what we care about, then we can change. Let's continue. People who have half the talent as you, people with half the skills as you, people with half the knowledge as you, have the dedication as you, and more importantly, people who have less the passion and love than you have already started making a living with your art. And this is something that I feel really bad about because there are a lot of people who are in the arts and making a living out of it, making a business out of it, when they themselves don't have the skills or don't have the same passion as what most artists have, and yet they're taking on all of the clients, they're taking on all the lucrative prices and charges and offers. It's so crazy to be able to think about it that way, and it's so crushing to be able to know artists personally who are much better than them, who simply just don't want to monetize their art. And that's why what other people and what most people have is this kind of a mediocre output, which is bland. It's a copy of what everybody else is doing. This is something that I see in an industry, especially in the video industry, maybe even in photography, and maybe something in music as well, that it lacks the kind of artistry that what art is. Of course, that sounds really presumptuous and really pretentious and really a loud and a boastful thing to say, because I am no way, shape, and form in a position to be able to say that other people's art are better, because again, it's so personal. But for me, knowing people and seeing this on a personal level, of seeing the person behind these kinds of businesses that actually lacks the kind of talent and the passion, which is much more important than talent, charge way much than what they are giving out. Of these people, because they're not that passionate with it, is so good in the business aspect of it. Let's continue. Everyone talks about buying back their time, but they don't really think about how they're using their time that they got back. So eventually, when you do have the assets and you have the capability, the financial capabilities, or that maybe you have something that of value that you could share with them or you could give them in terms of probably equity in your company or shares of stocks or whatever, what most people, what most gurus, and what most internet influencers will tell you, that the most important thing in your life is your time. With that being said, the next advice would be to be able to hire other people to be able to do the kinds of work that you are doing, or that you should outsource the kinds of things that you don't like to do to other people, meaning that you would buy back your time. Buying back your time, expensive as it would cost, is okay, because if you would really put a value to your time, a monetary value to your time, it's really priceless. And if it's really priceless, meaning that you should value it. But a lot of people, even when they get to a point wherein they can buy back their time, yes, they bought back their time, but the question is how they are spending their time, the time that they bought back. So they really have to be cognizant and aware of how they would spend their time, because they would think that they're doing the right thing by buying back their time. But if the time that they bought back is used in nonsensical things, then it really doesn't matter, does it? And yeah, to, I guess, wrap up this episode, I would share to you one last idea. I wonder if there is a boxer who has completely mastered the clinch and wins fights because of it. It's a crazy idea, because I think this came from an idea of mine of just looking at the different styles on how styles win fights. But I think this could also translate in other subjects. I think this could also translate into other careers and other practices, of you being good at this one thing, that you become the best person in the world in doing that one thing, and what kind of advantages that you're going to have just because you're the best at the world in doing that one thing. And so in boxing, the most obvious thing that we would probably attribute a boxer in terms of being great probably is speed, but more so the punching power, right? The strength. Next is the ruthlessness in terms of how quick they are. We're thinking about, I don't know, like a Rocky Marciano, Raging Bull type of fighter. We're thinking someone who's really good with combinations, is really quick. We're thinking about a Sugar Ray Leonard, and probably thinking about a Manny Pacquiao. And then there are people who are more defense oriented. We're thinking more of a Floyd Mayweather type. And then someone who's just really ruthless, someone who's really fierce, really explosive, like a Mike Tyson. But another style and another aspect of boxing, which is something that is it's part of boxing, but I don't believe is something that is someone is known to be the master of, or maybe that I'm just such a neophyte, or that I'm just such an ignorant boxing fan that I don't know about this. But there was just a thought of mine that said, I wonder if there was a boxer who has completely mastered the clinch and wins fights because of the clinch. I wonder what type of boxer that would be like, and I wonder how he would win fights just because he is the master of the clinch. Probably, I would imagine that he is someone who would frustrate his opponents and frustrate them to the point where they change their game plan. They change their tactics. They fight a certain way, maybe much more aggressive than they would like to be aggressive. And that's where this boxer would capitalize on that frustration and win the fight through the clinch. I don't know. It's just such a crazy idea. Maybe it's not the most original idea in the world, but when I thought about it, it felt like, wow, that's a really nice thought. That's a really nice idea. But I don't know. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. That's episode number 3, guys. And if you watch this in full or if you watch it in snippets, I'd like to be able to thank you for joining me with the Clarity Project podcast. And it's episode number 3. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.